Obviously, affordable housing is a big issue for Central Austin. Property values have gone skyrocketing over the last 20, 30 years. I think just being cognizant of the issue, number one, as the state develops some of their properties, the Bull Creek project being a good example, and incorporating affordable housing options within those developments. I think that the affordable housing issue extends to property tax help. Property taxes are crazy for Central Austinites, and it's been a driving force for the change that this district has undergone over the last 20, 30 years. As the people who lived in Allendale and Bracker Woods and the North Central Austin neighborhoods have, as their property values have gone up, they just can't afford to pay their property taxes anymore. And so, whereas in the middle of Crestview 25 years ago, it was a couple of state workers, able to afford the property taxes on their house. Those people are now living in Cedar Park, and that house in Crestview or Allendale is occupied by a couple of young professionals who are, paying taxes on a $600,000 house. So, I think there are some specific things that can be done to control property taxes, increasing the exemption, among others. But really, when it comes to the taxation issues, it's just really, all those dollars are fungible, and it really extends to other areas of concern, transportation and transportation infrastructure. As I've said numerous times at different forums, everything in the legislature begins and ends with the budget and the appropriations process. And so, my singular priority, if I'm elected as the representative for District 49, would be to be and I understand that I can't control which committee that I would be appointed to, but my primary objective would be to be a part of the budget process, because historically, Austin and Central Texas have not gotten in my opinion, their fair share of transportation dollars. And so, pushing to be a part of the budget process, to be a voice for Travis County and for Austin, to argue for those dollars, to fight for those dollars, to fund infrastructure projects, and to fund, to incentivize, more mass transit options. There's no singular answer for fixing where we're at. Austin just wasn't laid out to support the number of people that we have here now and that we're expecting over the next 20 years. I mean, it's truly kind of a nightmare scenario as far as infrastructure is concerned. But what it all boils down to, I think the way that I can be the best advocate for District 49 is to be a player in the budget process, be a player in the transportation committee. But again, even transportation issues, it all boils down to having a voice and the leverage of having a voice in the budget process. Well, and that's what we expect for them to do, is to issue a ruling saying that this is what needs to be fixed. And that's happened before. It's happened over and over, and the legislature has responded to those rulings by essentially putting a big fat Band-Aid on the issue. There are some specific things that probably should be done, that need to be done. Expanding pre-K is one of the most popular or the most talked about at this point. But there is really there's no simple fix, and I think I would be naive to think that I had the answer to how to fix school funding, public school funding. We want to look for fairness in the system, and that extends, this issue of how to fund public education extends to efficiencies in the appropriations process, looking at ways that we're spending money that maybe we don't need to be, and then being in a position to try to direct those dollars towards public education, as opposed to it just going to general revenue or something, something other than public education. the answer to fixing public education funding is getting enough legislators together to find a critical mass for people, for those legislators to be brave enough to vote for something big and comprehensive. There's just a lot of fear in the political world that if you're going to make a vote, if you make a vote that's going to upset educators, you're not going to be elected again. Mm-hmm. But the sign of a good compromise is that everybody's equally upset. And so the public education funding system is not going to be fixed comprehensively until we get that critical mass where we're willing to, where the House is willing to, as a body, not be so protectionist in their votes. And that may or may not ever happen. But in the meantime, I think we just need to look for inefficiencies in the budget, fight to correct those inefficiencies. You're looking at transportation contracts, textbook contracts, government contracts, and other areas that can and should be looked at for cuts, and then stand firm in directing those dollars back towards education. Charter schools.
Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Well, I know that this is a hot issue for some of the for educators. I don't think that it's necessarily as hot an issue for District 49 because we have very good public schools. It's not a problem. No one's sending, if you're living in Brocker Woods and your kids are going to Brocker Woods Elementary School, you're not looking to send them to private school or anywhere else because it's a fantastic little school, and that extends up and down the district from Barton Hills all the way up to the Domain. And so generally speaking, I think that everybody wants to talk about public school funding. And one of the things that I've put in some of my literature that I think is a priority is raising standards in the school system. And just as a business person, you know that if you want to increase the quality of product, one of the ways to do that is to introduce competition. Mm-hmm. And so whether it's charter schools or vouchers, I think that I would be very open to looking at those types of things. I want to protect our public education system and ensure that it is well funded and efficiently funded, and that it is made a priority, because education of our kids will always be the number one priority for all legislators. But I think that to come out staunchly against any type of competition for public school would be to say that we're afraid of competition. No, I don't think the state should have a role in local policing. I mean, we are a distinct community that has values, that are very different from those of Eagle Pass or El Paso or Dallas or anywhere. And so to have a bunch of members in the House of Representatives telling the Austin Police Department how they have to do things seems kind of ridiculous to me. So, I'm definitely for local control over that kind of thing. And that is one area of expertise that I would bring to the Travis County delegation, is my experience with criminal justice issues. I was a former prosecutor. I've worked as a criminal defense attorney primarily for the last 8 years. And so there's not another member of the Travis County House of Representatives delegation right now that has any expertise on those issues. Well, I think that it is, well, if you know the legislature, if you know how things get done up there, and a lot of people want to say things are broken and we've got to fix how, well, that's all fine and good on the campaign trail. But once you get into the Texas legislature, the way things work is compromise and being able to work with the leadership and not standing at the back mic throwing spitballs. That might look good on the campaign trail, and it might be some red meat for the true, the the more, I won't say extreme, but the farther to the side of the political spectrum. But the way to get things done is to be able to compromise, be able to work with the leadership, and that's the way forward. Up and until the state turns blue and the House is back to Democratic control, which I believe is going to happen sooner rather than later. But the way forward is not to be a complete obstructionist. It's not to be a complete pushover, but it's standing on your core values and not budging on those issues that are important to District 49, but being able to work with the leadership, Speaker Strauss's office, to move things forward and get things done. Like I mentioned, have some expertise in criminal justice issues. And I know that there are several bills or several areas of the criminal justice or the penal code, the Texas Penal Code, that are problems. One primarily, and this is seems unbelievable to a lot of people. The Texas DWI laws. You cannot do deferred adjudication on a DWI in Texas. It's one of only 2 offenses where you cannot do deferred adjudication: murder and DWIs. And that's a result of very strong lobbying by Mothers Against Drunk Driving over the years to make Texas have very strict DWI laws. So if you get charged with a DWI, you're either convicted or it's dismissed. Well, prosecutors and defense attorneys have found ways around that prohibition. They change the charge; it gets refiled as another type of misdemeanor case. That deferred adjudication is allowed. And so that's just a problem. I mean, it's thwarting the legislative intent. And so either the law needs to get in line with the practice, or the law needs to look at what the practice is and try to figure out a way to curb that behavior. Because right now the practice for DWIs is thwarting what the law says. And so to answer your question specifically, there's another area of DWI law. There is a loophole where you cannot do deferred adjudication, meaning you go on probation. If you complete everything, it gets dismissed. You cannot do it for a Class B or a Class A misdemeanor DWI. You cannot do it for a felony DWI, which would be a DWI charge with more than 2 prior convictions. But there's this little loophole in the middle there that's DWI with a child passenger. It's a state jail felony, and for whatever reason, you can do deferred adjudication for DWI with a child passenger, which to me seems to be a loophole. I can't come up with any justification why that's allowable, when I believe that is a more serious offense than perhaps even a third DWI. So to answer your question, I would file a bill to close the loophole for deferred adjudication on a DWI child passenger, and I feel like I could get progress on something like that. Well, I think that if you look at my breadth of experience, small business ownership, my experience as a law enforcement official, as a prosecutor, my experience as a small business owner, as a solo practice defense attorney. I own a part of a title company in Lampasas. I own a cattle business that has cattle around Central Texas. I'm a father, I'm a soccer coach, I'm an outdoorsman. I've been here for 20 years, UT Law School. If you look at my breadth of experience, I think that and my experience, and not just the fact that I was at the Capitol, but what I did while at the Capitol, positions me to be the most qualified, the widest breadth of experience, and to be the most effective advocate. I know how things work up there, and I know that if I go up there, I'm going to be able to work with both sides. I have existing relationships at the Capitol that shall go unnamed, but I do have existing relationships at the Capitol, and I know that if I am elected, if I get this job, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to be the most capable of effectively representing District 49 going forward.